Susie and I are from National Foundation for Educational Research, and what we're going to present today is we're going to talk about young people's transitions, and that's post-16 and post-19, and how employers can make a difference to this. We sort of feel that we are an independent research organisation, and what we bring to this is can really contribute towards closing this skills gap and growing skills for the economy at the moment. We also pride ourselves in actually turning a lot of our research evidence, our research findings, our evidence, into practical guidelines. And so if you visit our website, where a lot of this, where you can find this research, you'll also find that wherever possible, we turn it into guidelines for practitioners or else into policy papers. Okay, so first of all, would you get me to be? Yeah, that'd be great. So just by way of introduction, the question we're trying to throw light on is how do innovative approaches engage employers in education and ensure that young people benefit from their input. And we've drawn on principally on three recent studies for this. The first one there is a study that we carried out recently for the Department for Education, and it concentrates on, it examines innovative approaches to the work experience strand of the 16 to 19 study programs. And as I say, we carried that out recently. The second one is a study that we carried out in collaboration with London Council's, the London Enterprise Panel, and the South East Strategic Leaders. And the reason the four organisations got together was because we felt there was a real need to do some exploration into specifically how small and medium-sized enterprises in the southeast London and the southeast of England, how they are actually engaging in employer engagement. There are obviously more distinctive barriers for SMEs, so this study concentrated on highlighting some of the sort of innovative and emerging good practice that was going on in that area. And the third one was a study that actually NFER itself has funded, and because we feel so strongly about it, it built on a project that we did a number of years ago for the DFE about segmentation of NEETs, those not in education, employment or training. And no surprise that actually clearly NEETs are not a homogenous group, there are different types of NEETs, and one of those types of NEETs are those that are at risk of disengaging from education, but who do not face multiple and complex barriers. And NFER felt quite strongly, well actually, do you know what, if we could help that group to remain engaged, then there'd be more resources perhaps to concentrate on those that do actually are facing multiple and complex barriers. So it was a longitudinal study over 3 years, principally qualitative, but there's a small quant strand to it. Susie's going to talk about it later. And we've just reached the end of that project. So those are the three projects we've drawn on today, and I've tried to sort of really briefly draw them together there. I think perhaps the point to make in addition to what's there is that our studies, actually three studies, do represent quite broad geographical regions and different types of institutions, so schools, colleges, and different types of schools and colleges that we've been to. So it's not just one small study, predominantly qualitative, but it actually draws on quite a broad geographical and institutional base. Okay. And I'm going to hand over to Susie to talk about, in particular, the last project I talked about.
Okay, so from this research that Tami's just introduced, we have some illustrative case studies of innovative practice that we've seen happening. And like Tami said, this is from a variety of different schools and colleges in different geographical areas. We put them into two themes. One was engagement, which means sort of engagement in learning, so really trying to re-engage these young people in learning through experiences with employers. And the other theme was skills, so trying to develop these skills that the employers really want from these young people. So I'm going to talk about these two case studies, which come from the third project Tami was just talking about. And then I'll hand back to her to talk to you about some further examples. So the first case study is about extended employer work experience. So this was a programme of alternative provision, and it started at the beginning of year 10 right through to the end of year 11. So this was for quite a selective group of students. It wouldn't necessarily work with everyone. These students were selected at the end of year 9, based on being most at risk of disengaging from school. And what they did was they did 2 days in school where they focused on core subjects like English, maths, trying to get their C grade in those subjects. And then they did 1 day a week doing their vocational qualifications such as catering or media. And then they spent 2 full days a week out in work experience placements, things like being a teaching assistant or a park ranger or hairdressing. The students could choose these themselves based on the contacts the schools had. And if they didn't get on with where they were, for example, they decided, this isn't for me after all, I thought I wanted to be a teacher, but I don't, they could choose another placement. Just say this is quite a small group of students, actually, about 18 of them. So what impacts do we see from this alternative provision that they were given? So as Tami said, there was a small amount of quant research in this strand. So we tracked their attendance data from the beginning of year 10 to the end of year 11. And their attendance actually rose from 80% to 89%, which was quite remarkable for this group of students, really, because they were really on the edge of being excluded from school at this point. They weren't turning up, so it really did help them. And 13 out of the 18 pupils were still engaged in learning post-GCSE. So this was around about November time. They were in college placements. They were pursuing what they wanted to do. They were still engaged in learning and going on to doing something with their futures. They also learned some key skills, such as patience and maturity. They had a more positive attitude to learning. So when they were in the workplace, they could suddenly see, this is the reason for going to school, the reason for getting these skills. I'm actually using them in this workplace. So they came back to school with a more positive attitude to learning, and their punctuality got better as well. And we actually spoke to some of these students. I went out to these schools and spoke to the young people themselves, and they said things like the work experience helped them to develop skills such as teamwork. It helped them to understand the world of work better, what they might want to do later on, what was expected of them, what skills they needed, and it encouraged them to find out more about what they could do after year 11. So that was the first case study. The second one was part of a larger programme of research, well, a larger intervention in the school, and this was a small part of it. And this was, again, a small group of students, only 6 of them, that were deemed to be most at risk of disengaging. So this was a skills day that they went out to. So a business worked closely with the school. So in this example, it was Rockingham Speedway, which was near the school, which is a racetrack. They have some swanky offices. They work with the school to identify the skills students need, such as what are they struggling with at the moment, what problems in maths, for example, are they struggling with. The students go out on their skills day to this exciting environment that they think is cool and they're interested in, and they're made to do, they're put in teams to become little businesses, a bit like on The Apprentice, and they're given tasks such as arrange the catering for an event. So they're using English, maths, communication skills, and it's outside the school context. So they're in this exciting business environment, they're treated as adults, they're treated independently. You know, they can get up and make their cup of coffee, they have to come on time, that sort of thing. And they're using school skills in a work environment, which was really important. And the impacts from this one was, when they got back to school, they had increased confidence in maths, English, and the IT skills. So the skills that they were using in that teamwork and that little business they formed, they went back to school and they were opening their textbooks and seeing, oh, this maths problem, I can't do it. And then they realised, I've just done this in this skills day, and they can really relate back. What I'm learning in school is really going to be useful in later life and in work, and I've suddenly learned that actually I can do this, so it gave them much more confidence. They could see the relevance of schoolwork to future, and this is key. This came out, we did a number of case studies, this came out in many of them, and because of that they had a more positive attitude to attendance and learning. And like I said, they love being treated like adults, they like the independence, so that they could see that step. When they leave school, they'll go into a business environment and they'll be treated more like that. And the suggestion from the employer, actually, from Rockingham Speedway, was really this ran for year 10 and 11, but it would be better if it started in year 9, when before or as the students are making these decisions about what they're going to do for their options. So we saw these two things as being really positive and relating to the engagement and skills. And I'm now going to pass back to Tami, who is going to tell you about 2 other case studies that she was involved in.
Okay, and as Susie said, so we've sort of separated out into 2 particular themes. One is practice approaches, innovative approaches that actually concentrate on increasing the engagement of young people and the motivation of young people to understand the reason for their learning. And the other one is sort of developing their employability skills to prepare them, readiness for the world of work. So the first one, the first one that I'm going to talk about is a model that was developed in Kent called the 2-1-2 model, and this came out of the project that I mentioned, the second project on concentrating on SMEs. And it actually sort of broadly reflects the one Susie was talking about as well, the approach there, insofar as that I know hers was Key Stage 4, this is 16 plus, but it incorporated sort of 2 days of raising attainment in maths and English for young people and making them see or improving their knowledge, if you like, in those areas, and encouraging them to see the relevance of it to the world of work. They have 1 day on high quality work experience, and I'll come on to that a little bit more in a moment, but high quality work experience, and very importantly, that was actually integrated with the 2 days of technical or vocational learning that they were doing as well. So the whole package was sort of integrated together, and that point of the work experience being integrated with the area that they were interested in, and also the area that their qualification, their technical vocational qualification was in, was critical. So what were the benefits? What was the impact? There was widely seen to be mutually advantageous to employers and young people. From employers, and this is obviously key, and from what Simon was saying this morning, this comes through, that the employers wanted to actually be able to have a chance to input into the young people in their area, and input in terms of developing the skills of young people in areas that they wanted for their business. And of course it gave them the opportunity to actually meet these young people and assess them. And clearly very advantageous for young people. It helped them to clarify, it helped them to build their knowledge and skills, and helped them to clarify their understanding and routes that they wanted to take in the future. It supported ongoing engagement of young people in further education for longer. The young people, they were motivated. They understood the relevance of what they were doing, the learning that they were doing in the school, in their academic world, to what they wanted to do in the future. They were enjoying what they were doing, and hence that motivation, that enjoyment, made them much more engaged. And they did report that they were sort of more engaged in going forward and they recognised that perhaps they wouldn't have been before. And as far as Kent was concerned, they were sort of saying, well, it broadens their post-16 offer. So that clearly that's another fantastic sort of impact, another benefit, that they've got this broader offer. Okay, the other one I want to draw out today, and this came from the study that we did on the work experience as part of study programmes, and we were asked to concentrate to try and draw out innovative practice. The reason I particularly wanted to draw this one out is actually, and I'm borrowing a word from David Harborne here, but it's a good illustration of profound engagement. And I'll come on to explain that in a second. This was a case study which we investigated at Oldham FE College, and they had developed this Employers Advisory Board, which worked with, let me get the right one, the Digital and Creative faculty. So they had this board of 20 local businesses in that particular factor, in that area, and these 20 businesses actually did this dual, the main purpose for these dual engagements really. One is of informing curriculum development, and two was this actually inputting into staff's CPD. So in terms of informing the curricular development, they were, for example, inputting into the design of modules for the qualifications. They were setting project assignments for the young people, and they were inputting on a sort of regular basis to that. They were also, in terms of work experience, they were actually involved in the work experience prior to the young person going on the work experience. So they were the young people were actually having to submit CVs, and the businesses were interviewing the young people prior to the work experience. Okay. Okay, and in terms of the CPD for senior staff, the staff actually in the college were able to go to the businesses and spend work placement days there with the businesses, so it enabled them to upskill their knowledge and their skills in the creative and digital in those skills. So and also they could attend key meetings actually at the business, so they could refresh and update their skills as they were going through. That's simply a quote to illustrate it, which I'm sure you've read, so perhaps we should move on. Okay, so what Susie and I tried to do was to draw together, okay, so how can employers make a difference? What are the sort of key points from across all the case studies, across the three projects that we carried out? First of all, this point about offering authentic, relevant experience to the world of work. It is making it relevant to young people and employers, and valuing employers in that process. And I think that echoes again one of the things that Simon was saying this morning, valuing the employers in it. The employers are partners. They are to be cherished and valued in the process. And that came out very clearly, as indeed this word authentic, that the work experience was genuine. Young people can see through very easily if they're just being fobbed off with a task to do. And clearly they can input hugely, given the chance. So authentic. The second was prepare employers, education providers and young people prior to interaction. Huge focus, really important to get the most out of that interaction, whether it be work experience or whether it be more profound or more diverse than that, but whatever, to prepare them prior to the interaction. Thirdly, to monitor, review and build on the experience. It's getting the young people to, clearly it's to actually monitor and review it, as something Susie, in Susie's project. Schools have a huge problem with actually monitoring, for example, attendance data and retention data and etc., because systems keep changing and the goals keep changing. But that's really important to try and monitor exactly what's going on in order to understand whether the particular intervention or the particular approach is working. But also another point to draw out is this importance for young people to be given the opportunity to reflect on their experience, whatever it may have been, to help them understand how important it is that they're learning transferable skills, and the fact that they've worked in a team and produced this wonderful digital map for whatever in this team. That doesn't mean to say that they can only produce work on that. They can learn and transfer those skills to other areas. So again, another important area. And fourthly, proactively engage and maintain connections. I mean, this again goes back to the valuing the employers. Yes, schools and colleges and businesses need to actually proactively engage each other. And actually, we produced this Connect card for schools and colleges and SMEs to actually, what is it we have to look out for? What do we have to do in the first place to engage each other? little things like whether an employer rings up a school or a college, so important that the school and college get back to them that day preferably, if not the next day, and talking the same language or finding a common language. But also maintaining those connections. And for that, often it's the case that there needs to be a dedicated member of staff who can actually take ownership of it and draw it. School staff and college staff, as we all know, are incredibly busy, and this is just something that can perhaps drop off the radar. So having actually a member of staff, if it's at all possible, who can take ownership of it and can help to ease those communications, and ditto in companies as well. Whistle stop tour. Hope it was coherent enough. Yes.
Thank you very much.